The oncologist's voice barely registered over the static in Caleb's head. Stage 3, aggressive treatment, uncertain outcome. At 32, he should have been worried about parent-teacher conferences and soccer practice, not whether his 5-year-old daughter would remember his face. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as reality crashed down. He was alone in this sterile room, alone in this fight, and if he didn't make it, Mara would be alone too. Single fathers weren't supposed to get cancer, but life didn't care about fairness. It never had. If you want to see how a broken man finds hope in the most unexpected place, stay until the end. Hit like and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The waiting room smelled like disinfectant and fear. Caleb Hayes sat rigid in the plastic chair, hands clasped between his knees, staring at the scuffed linoleum floor. Around him, other patients waited with varying degrees of resignation. An elderly woman knitting with trembling hands, a middle-aged man scrolling mindlessly through his phone, a young couple holding hands so tightly their knuckles had gone white. Everyone here carried the same unspoken question: how much time do I have left? He shouldn't be here. He had a quarterly report due by Friday, groceries to pick up, and Mara's school permission slip sitting unsigned on the kitchen counter. Normal things. Adult things. The kind of mundane responsibilities that had filled his days since becoming a single father 4 years ago. Mr. Hayes? The nurse stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand, her expression professionally neutral. Caleb rose on legs that didn't quite feel attached to his body and followed her down a corridor that seemed to stretch endlessly. Each step felt heavier than the last. Dr. Morrison was waiting in the consultation room, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes that had delivered too much bad news. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. The biopsy results came back. "I'm sorry, Caleb. It's pancreatic cancer, stage 3. The words landed like physical blows. Caleb heard her continue talking. Treatment options, survival rates, immediate next steps, but it all dissolved into white noise. Stage 3, pancreatic. The statistics he'd frantically Googled at 2 in the morning suddenly became horrifyingly personal. What does that mean? His voice came out rougher than intended. In plain English. Dr. Morrison folded her hands on the desk. It means we need to start treatment immediately. Chemotherapy, possibly radiation. We'll need to discuss surgical options depending on how you respond. It's aggressive, but you're young and otherwise healthy. That works in your favor. How long? I don't deal in timelines, Caleb. Every case is different. How long? He repeated, harder this time. She held his gaze. Without treatment, 6 to 12 months. With treatment and a positive response, we're looking at extended survival. Some patients go into remission. Others manage it as a chronic condition. But I won't lie to you, this is serious. Caleb's mind immediately went to Mara. 5 years old, gap-toothed, obsessed with dinosaurs, and convinced that her father could fix anything. What would he tell her? How did you explain to a kindergartner that her only parent might be dying? I have a daughter, he said quietly. She's 5. I'm all she has. Something softened in Dr. Morrison's expression. Then we fight like hell. We start chemo next week. I'll have my office coordinate with scheduling. She slid a folder across the desk. This contains information about support groups, financial assistance programs, and counseling services. You don't have to do this alone. But that was exactly the problem. He was alone. Caleb picked Mara up from after-school care at 5:30, the same as always. She came running across the playground, backpack bouncing, shouting about a caterpillar she'd found at recess. He caught her in a hug that lasted a fraction too long. Daddy, you're squishing me. Sorry, Bug. He released her, forcing a smile. How was your day? She chattered the entire drive home about her friend Sophie and the injustice of only getting 15 minutes for art time. Caleb made the appropriate sounds of interest while his mind churned through impossible calculations. Treatment meant taking time off work. Time off meant less money. Less money meant what? He barely scraped by as it was on his project manager salary, even with the child support that Mara's mother had paid exactly twice before disappearing to Portland with her new boyfriend. Their apartment was small but clean, a one-bedroom that Caleb had given to Mara while he slept on the pull-out couch. Dinosaur posters covered her walls. Her stuffed brontosaurus, affectionately named Larry, sat on her pillow. The normalcy of it all made his chest ache. He made her favorite dinner, mac and cheese with cut-up hot dogs, and watched her eat while pushing his own food around the plate. When had he last actually tasted anything? "You're quiet," Mara observed, tomato sauce on her chin. "Just tired, Bug. You're always tired. That's what happens when you get old." She giggled. "You're not old. Grandpa Jim is old." Caleb's father had died 3 years ago. Heart attack at 61, gone before the ambulance arrived. His mother had followed 6 months later, officially a stroke, but Caleb knew it was really a broken heart. No siblings, no cousins he kept in touch with. His family tree had been pruned down to just him and Mara. "Bath time, oh," he announced, clearing the plates. The evening routine unfolded with practiced efficiency. Bath, pajamas, teeth brushing, 2 stories, currently on a dinosaur encyclopedia phase, and then lights out. Caleb sat on the edge of Mara's bed, smoothing her dark hair back from her forehead. "Love you, Daddy." "Love you too, Bug. More than anything in the world." "Even more than pizza? Even more than pizza." She seemed satisfied with this and rolled over, hugging Larry close. Caleb watched her until her breathing evened out, then carefully extracted himself from the room. In the silence of the living room, the weight he'd been holding off all day finally crashed down. He sank onto the couch and dropped his head into his hands. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer, 6 to 12 months without treatment, a 5-year-old daughter who needed him. And absolutely no one to call. But work the next day was a special kind of torture. Caleb worked for a mid-sized tech company doing project management, coordinating timelines, managing stakeholders, keeping various fires from spreading out of control. It was decent work with decent pay and insurance that was about to become invaluable. But sitting through the Monday morning status meeting felt surreal, listening to people argue about feature prioritization and launch dates when he'd just been handed an expiration date of his own. "Caleb, you with us?" He blinked. His boss, Richard, was staring at him expectantly. The entire conference room had gone quiet. "Sorry, could you repeat that?" Richard's eyebrows rose. "I asked if you'd had a chance to review the timeline for the Morrison project." "Right. Yes. I sent my notes Friday." Had he? The days were blurring together. "Great. Let's move on to resource allocation." Caleb forced himself to focus, taking notes he'd probably never read. Across the table, Ivy Carter was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. She was relatively new to the team, hired 6 months ago as a business analyst, sharp as a tack, and possessed of a completely unfiltered way of speaking that either charmed people or pissed them off. Usually both. They'd clashed more than once. She questioned everything, pushed back on timelines she deemed unrealistic, and had once told him in front of the entire team that his risk assessment was optimistically delusional. He'd written her off as arrogant. She'd probably written him off as rigid. Now she was still watching him, head tilted slightly, and Caleb looked away. The meeting finally ended. Caleb gathered his laptop and headed for the door, but Ivy intercepted him in the hallway. "You look like hell," she said without preamble. "Good morning to you too." "I'm serious. You okay?" "Fine. Just didn't sleep well." Her dark eyes narrowed. Ivy had this unnerving ability to see through bullshit, which made her excellent at her job and terrible for anyone trying to maintain privacy. She opened her mouth, clearly about to push, but Caleb's phone buzzed. It was the hospital, scheduling for his first chemo appointment. "I need to take this," he said, already walking away. He spent his lunch break on the phone with the oncology department, then with HR trying to understand his medical leave options, then with his insurance company trying to decipher what was actually covered. By the time he hung up, he had a headache building behind his eyes and the distinct feeling that he was drowning in bureaucracy. The afternoon crawled by. At 4:30, he packed up to pick up Mara, but as he passed Ivy's desk, she called out, "Hayes, got a minute?" He paused. "I have to get my daughter." "This won't take long." She stood, gesturing to one of the small meeting rooms. "Please?" Against his better judgment, Caleb followed her inside. Ivy closed the door and crossed her arms. "What's going on with you?" "Nothing. I'm fine." "You're not fine. You zoned out 3 times in that meeting. You look like you haven't slept in a week. And you just lied to me, which you're really bad at, by the way. She paused. Look, I know we're not exactly friends, but if something's wrong, why do you care? The words came out harsher than intended. Ivy didn't flinch. Because I'm not an asshole, despite what you might think? Caleb scrubbed a hand over his face. He was too tired for this. Too tired for everything. I got a diagnosis, he heard himself say. Cancer. They want to start chemo next week. Ivy's expression shifted, not to pity, which he couldn't have handled, but to something more complex. Shit. Yeah. What kind? Pancreatic, stage 3. She was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, what do you need? The question caught him off guard. Not I'm sorry, or that's terrible, or any of the useless platitudes people offered when they didn't know what else to say. Just, what do you need? I don't know, he admitted. I'm still trying to figure that out. Ivy nodded slowly. Okay, well, when you do know, tell me. And in the meantime, stop pretending you're fine. It's insulting to both of us. Before he could respond, she walked out, leaving Caleb standing alone in the meeting room, oddly off balance. The first chemo session was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Caleb arranged for Mara to stay with his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, a grandmother in her 70s who occasionally watched her in emergencies. He'd explained that he had a medical appointment, nothing more. Mrs. Chen had nodded knowingly and promised to make Mara her special dumplings. The infusion center was quieter than Caleb expected. Recliners arranged in rows, IV poles standing sentinel, nurses moving efficiently between patients. He was assigned a chair near the window and tried not to stare at the other people receiving treatment, tried not to see his own future reflected in their tired faces and thinning hair. The nurse who accessed his port was named Jessica, young and relentlessly upbeat. First time? Yeah. You're going to do great. We'll start you on some anti-nausea meds, then begin the infusion. The whole thing takes about 3 hours. You can read, watch something on your phone, nap if you want. Just let me know if you feel weird. And I mean any kind of weird. No toughing it out, okay? Caleb nodded. The needle went in. The bags of poison began their slow drip into his veins, killing the cancer along with parts of him he'd probably miss later. He'd brought his laptop thinking he might get some work done, but found himself just staring at the screen. Around him, other patients chatted with their companions, spouses, adult children, friends. Everyone seemed to have someone. Is this seat taken? Caleb looked up. Ivy stood there in jeans and a sweater, holding 2 cups of coffee and looking completely out of place. What are you doing here? You said your appointment was at 10. I figured you could use company. She held out one of the coffees. Brought you this. Black, right? You seem like a black coffee person. He took it automatically. You didn't have to. I know I didn't have to. I wanted to. She dropped into the chair beside him, completely unbothered by the medical equipment and clinical setting. How are you feeling? Like I'm being poisoned. Well, you are, technically. She sipped her coffee. But it's therapeutic poisoning, so that's something. Despite himself, Caleb felt the corner of his mouth twitch. You're insane. So I've been told. She pulled out her own laptop. I have some work to catch up on, so I'll just sit here and be quiet. Unless you want to talk. Then I can do that too. You really don't need to stay. And yet, here I am. She opened her laptop, effectively ending the discussion. So Caleb sat there, poison dripping into his veins, drinking mediocre coffee, while Ivy Carter worked beside him like this was the most normal thing in the world. He wanted to be annoyed. He wanted to tell her to leave, that he didn't need a babysitter, that he was fine on his own. But the truth was, having her there made the sterile room feel a little less cold. About an hour in, the nausea hit. Jessica had warned him, but knowing it was coming didn't make it any better. Caleb closed his eyes, breathing carefully through his nose. You okay? Ivy's hand appeared on his arm, just nauseous. She immediately flagged down Jessica, who adjusted something in his IV. That should help. Give it a few minutes. It did help, marginally. Ivy kept her hand on his arm until the worst passed, her presence steady and undemanding. Thanks, Caleb said quietly. Don't mention it. They didn't talk much after that. Ivy worked, occasionally muttering at her spreadsheets. Caleb dozed. The 3 hours passed slowly, but somehow less miserably than he'd anticipated. When it was finally over, Jessica disconnected him and gave her standard discharge instructions. Caleb stood carefully, testing his balance. "I'm driving you home," Ivy announced. "I drove myself here. And I'm driving you home anyway. You look green. I'll get someone to pick up your car later." "Ivy, don't argue with me, Hayes. You'll lose." She was probably right. Caleb was too wrung out to fight anyway. The drive back was quiet. Ivy navigated the afternoon traffic with the same no-nonsense efficiency she brought to everything else. Caleb leaned his head against the window, grateful he didn't have to make conversation. "You need to tell work," Ivy said eventually, "about the cancer." "I will." "When?" "Soon." "Caleb." She glanced at him. "You're going to need accommodations, flexible scheduling, medical leave. You can't just power through this." "I know. Do you? Because you seem like the kind of stubborn idiot who would try." He almost smiled. "Takes one to know one." "Fair point." She pulled up in front of his apartment building. "I'm going to give you my number. Next appointment, text me. I'll come." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I'm choosing to. There's a difference." She handed him her phone. "Put your number in." Caleb did, too tired to argue. When he handed it back, Ivy immediately sent him a text. Just a simple, "Hey," so he'd have hers too. "Get some rest," she said, "and eat something even if you don't want to. Small bites." "Yes, Mom." "I'm serious. Your daughter needs you functional." That sobered him quickly. Ivy saw it register and her expression softened just slightly. "You're going to be okay, Hayes, but you need to let people help you." "Why are you doing this?" She was quiet for a moment, fingers drumming on the steering wheel. "Because somebody should. And apparently, I'm somebody." She waved him toward the building. "Go, before I get all emotional and ruin my reputation." Caleb climbed out, still processing. As he headed for the entrance, Ivy called out the window. "Hey, Hayes!" He turned. "You're not alone in this. Remember that." Then she drove off, leaving Caleb standing on the sidewalk, something tight and unfamiliar lodging in his chest. The side effects hit hard over the next few days. Caleb had read the pamphlets, listened to Jessica's warnings, thought he was prepared. He wasn't. The nausea was relentless, coming in waves that left him clutching the bathroom sink at 3 in the morning. Food tasted like cardboard when he could stomach it at all. His body ached in places he didn't know could ache. But the worst part was the exhaustion, bone-deep, overwhelming fatigue that made even simple tasks feel insurmountable. Getting Mara ready for school became an ordeal. Making dinner required rest breaks. He fell asleep reading her bedtime stories and woke to find her tucked in beside him, small hand curled against his chest. Mrs. Chen noticed. "You need help," she said one evening when he picked Mara up, and it wasn't a question. "I'm managing." "You look half dead, boy. This is not managing." She was right, of course. But what was he supposed to do? Hire a full-time nanny he couldn't afford? Ask for help from friends he didn't have? His phone buzzed. "Ivy. How are you feeling?" He stared at the text, debating how to answer. Finally typed, "Like I got hit by a truck." Her response was immediate. "I'm bringing dinner tomorrow. Any allergies? You don't have to do that." "And yet I'm going to." "Allergies?" "No, but really, Ivy, see you at 6. Caleb sighed, but something in him relaxed fractionally. Maybe it was okay to accept help. Just this once. Ivy showed up the next evening with enough Chinese takeout to feed a small army. She took one look at Caleb and shook her head. "You look terrible." "You really need to work on your bedside manner. I'm not trying to comfort you. I'm trying to keep you alive." She moved past him into the apartment, bags rustling. "Where's your daughter?" "Mara's in her room, probably building a dinosaur habitat." "Cool, I brought extra spring rolls." Mara emerged cautiously, eyeing the stranger in their living room. Ivy crouched down to her level. "Hey, I'm Ivy. I work with your dad. I heard you like dinosaurs?" Mara nodded, hugging Larry. "What's your favorite?" Stegosaurus because of the plates. Solid choice. I'm partial to velociraptors myself. Smaller, but smarter. Ivy straightened. We brought food. You hungry? Just like that, Mara was won over. She chattered through dinner about school and her dinosaur collection, while Ivy listened with genuine interest and Caleb picked at his lo mein, managing a few bites. After dinner, Ivy helped clean up while Mara went back to her room. Caleb watched her navigate his kitchen like she'd been there 100 times, putting away leftovers, loading the dishwasher. You're good with her, he said. Kids are easy. They haven't learned to bullshit yet. She dried her hands. How's the nausea? Better than yesterday. Still not great. Are you taking the anti-nausea meds? When I remember. Ivy pulled out her phone. I'm setting you a reminder. 3 times a day, alarms will go off. Take your damn medication, Hayes. You're very bossy. Yes, and you're very stubborn. We're a perfect match. She finished programming his phone and handed it back. I'm coming back Thursday, same time. Ivy, you can't just watch me. She grabbed her bag. Get some rest and eat those leftovers. I'll quiz you on Thursday. After she left, Caleb stood in his small kitchen, surrounded by containers of food he hadn't had to cook, and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, less alone. Mad. Thursday became a routine, then Tuesday and Thursday. Then somehow, Ivy was showing up 3 or 4 times a week, always with food, always staying just long enough to make sure Caleb ate and Mara was settled. She never made it feel like charity. She'd work on her laptop at his kitchen table while he rested on the couch. She'd read to Mara when Caleb was too tired. She brought groceries without being asked and left them in the fridge with no fanfare. Why are you doing this? Caleb asked one night after Mara had gone to bed. Ivy looked up from her laptop. Doing what? All of this. The food, the visits, He gestured vaguely. Everything. She closed her laptop, giving him her full attention. You want the truth? Please. Because I know what it's like to need help and not have anyone to ask. And because you're a good dad trying to deal with a shitty situation and your kid shouldn't have to suffer because you're too proud to accept support. She held his gaze. And maybe because I actually like you, Hayes. Shocking, I know. We barely know each other. We've worked together for 6 months. I've seen you in crisis mode more times than I can count. You stay late to help your team meet deadlines. You actually listen when people talk. You bring your daughter to the office Christmas party and spend the whole time making sure she's having fun instead of networking. Ivy shrugged. I know enough. Caleb didn't know what to say to that. Plus, Ivy added, you're less annoying than most people. Low bar, but still. That pulled a laugh out of him, rough and unexpected. Ivy grinned. There it is. I was starting to think you'd forgotten how. Forgotten what? How to laugh. Maybe he had. The last few years had been about survival, getting through each day, keeping Mara safe and fed and loved. There hadn't been much room for anything else. But sitting here now, Ivy sprawled in his worn armchair like she belonged there. Caleb felt something shift. Not happiness, exactly. Not yet. But maybe the possibility of it. His phone alarm went off. Medication time. You're learning, Ivy observed. I have a good teacher. She smiled, soft and genuine. Get some rest, Hayes. I'll lock up on my way out. But she stayed another hour anyway, just keeping him company in the quiet. The second round of chemo hit harder than the first. Caleb woke up the morning after treatment unable to get out of bed. His body simply refused to cooperate. Mara came padding in around 7, still in her dinosaur pajamas. Daddy, we're going to be late. He tried to sit up. The room spun. I know, Bug. Give me a minute. But a minute stretched into 10, then 20. He couldn't do it. Couldn't get up. Couldn't function. Couldn't be the parent his daughter needed. Panic started to creep in. What if this was the new normal? What if he couldn't take care of her anymore? His phone was on the nightstand. With trembling hands, he found Ivy's number and typed, I need help. She called immediately. What's wrong? I can't get up. Mara needs to get to school and I can't. His voice cracked. I'm on my way. 20 minutes. Can you hang on? Yeah. Put Mara on. He handed the phone to his daughter. It's Ivy. Mara's face brightened. Hi, Ivy. Whatever Ivy said made her giggle. When she handed the phone back, she seemed less worried. Ivy says she's bringing donuts. 17 minutes later, Caleb timed it. His front door opened. Ivy appeared in his bedroom doorway, assessed the situation with one glance, and shifted into action. Okay, Mara, let's get you ready for school. Did you brush your teeth? Not yet. Bathroom, go. I'll find your clothes. She got Mara dressed, fed, and out the door in under 30 minutes, promising to drop her at school on her way to work. Then she came back to Caleb's bedroom. How bad is it? I can't move without feeling like I'm going to pass out. Have you eaten? No. Taken your meds? He shook his head, ashamed. Ivy didn't scold. She just brought water and pills, then disappeared into the kitchen. He heard her moving around, and soon the smell of toast filled the apartment. She returned with dry toast and ginger ale. Small bites, don't argue. Caleb managed half a piece of toast before nausea overwhelmed him. Ivy held his hair back while he was sick, then cleaned up without comment. I'm calling in, she announced when he was settled back in bed. You can't do that. Already did. Sent Richard an email. Family emergency. She pulled the chair from his desk over to the bedside. I'm staying. Ivy, you're not arguing your way out of this, Hayes. You need someone here, and I'm someone. Deal with it. He wanted to protest, to insist he'd be fine, that she had her own life and responsibilities. But the relief of not being alone was too overwhelming. Thank you, he whispered. She reached out and took his hand, her grip firm and warm. You don't have to thank me. I don't understand why you're doing this. I told you. No, I mean really. We weren't even friends before this. Why do you care so much? Ivy was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. When I was 16, my mom got breast cancer, stage 4. We didn't have much family, and the few relatives we had didn't want to deal with it. I watched her go through treatment alone because I was too young to understand what she needed. She died 6 months later. She looked at him. I swore that if I ever saw someone going through that again, I wouldn't let them face it alone. So here I am. Caleb's chest tightened. Ivy, I'm sorry. Don't be. Just let me help you. Okay? He said, and meant it. She stayed all day, working from his kitchen table, checking on him every hour, making sure he stayed hydrated. When it was time to pick up Mara, she brought her home with more donuts and somehow convinced her that Daddy, having a sick day, was perfectly normal. That night, after Mara was asleep, Caleb found Ivy still there, tidying up the living room. You should go home, he said. You've done more than enough. I will, soon. She folded the blanket from the couch. How are you feeling? Better. Still shaky, but better. Good. She hesitated, then crossed to where he stood. Caleb, I need to say something. Okay. You're not a burden. I need you to hear that. Whatever you're thinking right now, that you're too much trouble, that you should be able to handle this alone, that needing help makes you weak, it's all bullshit. Her eyes were fierce. You're sick. You're fighting for your life. And asking for help doesn't make you less of a father or less of a person. It makes you human. Something in Caleb broke open. All the fear and pride and stubborn independence he'd been clinging to crumbled, and what was left was just raw, terrified honesty. I'm scared, he admitted. I'm scared I won't beat this. I'm scared of what happens tomorrow if I don't make it. I'm scared that I'm not strong enough. You're strong enough, Ivy said firmly, and you're not doing this alone anymore. You have me. For as long as you need me, you have me. The weight of those words settled over him, both terrifying and comforting. He'd spent 4 years building walls around himself and his daughter, convinced that keeping people out was the same as keeping them safe. But maybe he'd been wrong. Maybe letting someone in was the bravest thing he could do. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. Do what? Let someone help. Trust someone. He met her eyes. Let someone matter. Ivy stepped closer, her hand finding his. You just did. They stood there in his small living room, hands clasped, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. Caleb felt it. The shift, the crack in his armor, the terrifying possibility of something more. Stay, he heard himself say. Tonight, please. I'm not leaving you alone in this, Ivy replied. Not tonight, not ever. And for the first time since his diagnosis, Caleb believed her. For the first time in years, he believed in anything at all. Ivy didn't leave that night. She took the couch without asking, kicked off her shoes, and was asleep within minutes like it was the most natural thing in the world. Caleb stood in the doorway to his bedroom for a long moment, watching the rise and fall of her breathing in the dim light from the street, before finally closing the door and collapsing into bed. He woke at dawn to the sound of someone moving in his kitchen. For a disoriented second, panic gripped him. Someone was in his apartment. Mara was vulnerable. But then he remembered. Ivy. The smell of coffee drifted down the hallway, and when he shuffled out in sweatpants and a t-shirt that had seen better days, he found her already dressed, hair pulled back, scrolling through her phone with one hand while the coffee maker burbled beside her. "You're up early," he said, voice rough with sleep. She glanced up. "Old habit. My mom used to say sleep was for people without deadlines." A pause. "How are you feeling?" "Like slightly warmed over death instead of fully frozen death. Progress." "I'll take it." She poured him coffee, black, and slid the mug across the counter. "Mara's still asleep. I checked on her 20 minutes ago. Kid sleeps like a rock." "She gets that from me. Used to, anyway." Caleb wrapped his hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into his palms. "Before all this, I could sleep through anything. And now my brain won't shut off long enough to let me." Ivy nodded like she understood. She probably did. He was learning that Ivy understood more than she let on, saw more than most people bothered to look for. "I have to go home and change before work," she said, draining her own coffee. "But I'll be back tonight. 6:30. I'm making spaghetti." "You don't have to keep doing this." "We've been over this, Hayes. Yes, I do." She grabbed her bag from the couch, checked her phone again. "There's oatmeal in the pantry. Make Mara eat some before school. She tried to convince me yesterday that donuts count as breakfast." "They have eggs in them." "That's what she said. Kids got your stubbornness." Ivy headed for the door, then stopped. "Hey, yeah? You did good yesterday, asking for help. That took guts." Before he could respond, she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her. Caleb stood alone in his kitchen, steam rising from his coffee, and realized he was smiling. Mara emerged 30 minutes later, dragging Larry by one leg, hair sticking up in 5 different directions. She climbed onto a kitchen chair and peered at him with bleary eyes. "Is Ivy coming back?" "Tonight." "Good. She's funny." "Yeah," Caleb said, pouring milk over her oatmeal. "She is. Do you like her?" The question caught him off guard. "What kind of like?" Like? Sophie's mom has a boyfriend now. He comes over and they watch movies and kiss and stuff." Mara made a face. "It's gross." Caleb set the bowl in front of her, buying time. "Ivy's my friend. She's helping us out because I'm sick. But do you like her?" Out of the mouths of 5-year-olds. "Eat your oatmeal, bug." "You didn't answer. And you didn't eat." Mara sighed dramatically, but picked up her spoon. Crisis averted. For now. The truth was, Caleb didn't know how to answer that question. A month ago, Ivy Carter had been the coworker who challenged him in meetings and made him second-guess his project timelines. Now she was the person who showed up when he couldn't get out of bed, who fed his daughter and sat with him through the worst of the nausea, who looked at him like he wasn't just a collection of failing cells and bad odds. Did he like her? The question felt too small for what was happening between them. Work was a blur. Caleb pushed through emails and status updates, grateful that most of his team had stopped asking pointed questions about his frequent absences. Richard had pulled him aside 2 weeks ago after Caleb finally disclosed the diagnosis, promised him whatever flexibility he needed, and then proceeded to awkwardly pat his shoulder like he was defusing a bomb. Well-meaning, but uncomfortable for everyone involved. Ivy caught his eye across the office around 3. She was on a call, but she mouthed, "You okay?" And he nodded. She narrowed her eyes like she didn't quite believe him, but didn't push. At 5, he left to pick up Mara. By 6:15, they were home, and Mara was building an elaborate dinosaur battle scene on the living room floor when Ivy knocked. "It's open!" Caleb called from the couch, where he was failing to read the same email for the fourth time. Ivy let herself in, arms loaded with grocery bags. "I brought reinforcements, garlic bread, salad, and enough pasta to feed a small village." Mara abandoned her dinosaurs immediately. "Can I help cook?" "Absolutely. Wash your hands first." Caleb watched them disappear into the kitchen, Mara chattering about her day while Ivy made interested noises and asked follow-up questions. He should get up, offer to help, do something other than sit here like a useless lump. But his body had other ideas, and getting horizontal on the couch suddenly seemed like the best plan he'd ever had. He must have dozed off, because the next thing he knew, Ivy was shaking his shoulder gently. "Dinner's ready. Think you can eat?" "Der thought, why it was day." The smell of garlic and tomato sauce made his stomach turn, but he forced himself upright. "I'll try." Mara had set the table with mismatched plates and napkins folded into something approximating triangles. She beamed with pride when Caleb complimented her work. "Ivy showed me how. She said presentation matters." Ivy's right. They ate, or at least Mara and Ivy ate while Caleb picked at his pasta and managed half a piece of garlic bread. But he was there, at the table with them, and that felt like something. After dinner, Ivy started cleaning up, but Caleb stopped her. "You cooked. I clean. You can barely stand. I'm not completely useless yet." The word hung in the air, sharper than he'd intended. Ivy set down the plate she was holding and turned to face him. "No one thinks you're useless. I can't even make my kid dinner anymore. I can't get through a full day of work. Half the time I can't get out of bed without help." The frustration that had been building for weeks spilled over. "What exactly am I good for right now?" "You're good for being her father, for being here, for fighting." Ivy's voice was firm. "You think Mara cares whether you cooked the spaghetti or I did. She cares that you're sitting at that table with her. That's what matters. I should be able to do more." "Says who? Some arbitrary standard you set for yourself?" She crossed her arms. "You're sick, Caleb. Sick. You're allowed to need help. You're allowed to not be superhuman. I'm supposed to be enough for her. You are enough, even when you're sick, even when you need support. You're still her dad. You're still showing up. That's enough." Caleb wanted to argue, to push back, but he was too damn tired. And maybe, somewhere deep down, he knew she was right. Mara poked her head into the kitchen. "Can we watch a movie?" "What movie?" Ivy asked. "The one with the dinosaurs, the old one, not the scary new one." "Jurassic Park it is," Caleb said, grateful for the distraction. They settled on the couch, Mara wedged between them with Larry clutched to her chest. Ivy had seen it a dozen times, everyone had, but she watched with the same attention she gave everything, occasionally whispering facts to Mara about how real paleontology worked versus movie magic. Caleb found himself watching Ivy more than the screen. The way she smiled when Mara laughed at the lawyer getting eaten by the T-Rex. The way her hand absently rubbed circles on Mara's back when the raptors showed up and his daughter tensed. The way she fit into this space like she'd always been here. It terrified him. He'd built his life around protecting Mara, around making sure she never felt the abandonment he'd felt when her mother walked away. He'd kept people at arm's length, kept relationships surface level, because letting someone in meant risking them leaving. And people always left. But Ivy kept showing up, even when it was hard, even when he was difficult, even when there was nothing in it for her except the dubious pleasure of dealing with his stubborn ass and watching him slowly fall apart. She kept showing up. The movie ended. Mara was asleep, mouth open slightly, one hand still gripping Larry. Caleb carefully extracted himself and carried her to bed. When he returned, Ivy was loading the dishwasher. "I told you I'd clean. And I ignored you. Shocking development." She closed the dishwasher and started it running. "I should head out. Early meeting tomorrow." "Ivy?" He stopped her before she could grab her bag. "Why are you really doing this?" She'd explained before. Her mom, the loneliness, the promise she'd made. But standing here now, in the quiet of his apartment with the dishwasher humming and his daughter asleep down the hall, he needed to understand. Ivy was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, Her voice was softer than usual. Because I've watched you for 6 months being a good father and a decent person, and then life handed you the shittiest possible card, and you're still trying to do everything alone. She met his eyes. And because somewhere along the way, you stopped being just a coworker and became someone I care about, someone I want to help, someone I... She trailed off. Someone you... what? Someone I don't want to lose. The admission seemed to cost her. Is that honest enough for you? Caleb's heart did something complicated in his chest. I'm a terrible bet right now. You know that, right? Stage 3 cancer, single dad, more baggage than an airport carousel. I'm not placing bets, Hayes. I'm just showing up. But why? You could walk away. This isn't your problem. I'm not your responsibility. No, you're not my responsibility. You're my choice. She stepped closer, and I'm choosing to be here. I'm choosing to help. I'm choosing you, even if you're too stubborn to see why anyone would. Something cracked open in Caleb's chest, something that had been locked down tight for too long. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Let someone be there. Let someone matter. He swallowed hard. Let someone see me like this, weak and sick and scared, and not run. I'm not running. Ivy reached up, her hand cupping his jaw. I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere. He wanted to believe her, wanted it so badly it ached. What if I don't make it? The question came out barely above a whisper. What if the treatment doesn't work? Then we deal with that if it happens. But right now you're here. We're here, and I'm going to keep showing up until you believe that you're worth showing up for. Caleb closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. When was the last time someone had touched him like this? Gentle, deliberate, like he was something precious instead of something broken. I'm scared, he admitted. I know. I'm scared of getting worse. I'm scared of leaving Mara alone. I'm scared of... He stopped, unable to say it. Scared of what? Scared of caring about you and then losing you too. Or you losing me. He opened his eyes. I can't ask you to sign up for that. You're not asking. I already signed up. Ivy's thumb brushed across his cheekbone. I know what I'm walking into, Caleb. I'm not naive. This is hard, and it's going to get harder. But I'd rather be here, in the hard stuff with you, than anywhere else pretending I don't care. You're insane. So you keep saying. She smiled, small and sad and genuine. But you're stuck with me anyway. He wanted to kiss her. The realization hit him like a physical force. Standing here in his dim kitchen with her hand on his face and her eyes searching his, he wanted to close the distance between them and see if she tasted as brave as she sounded. But he couldn't. Not yet. Not when he was still figuring out how to stay alive, let alone how to let someone into the mess his life had become. As if sensing his hesitation, Ivy dropped her hand and stepped back, giving him space. Get some rest, she said, her voice carefully neutral. I'll see you tomorrow. Same time? Same time. After she left, Caleb stood in his kitchen for a long time, replaying the conversation, her words, the look in her eyes when she'd said she was choosing him. Maybe, he thought, letting someone in wasn't the same as letting them down. Maybe it was exactly what he needed to survive this. The third round of chemo came 2 weeks later, and this time Caleb knew what to expect. Jessica greeted him like an old friend when he arrived at the infusion center, already prepping his chair by the window. How have you been holding up? Still standing, barely. That's the spirit. Bleak optimism is my favorite kind. She got him settled, accessed his port. Your friend coming today? She's not my... He stopped. What was Ivy, exactly? Friend felt inadequate. Something more felt presumptuous. Yeah, she should be here soon. Ivy arrived 15 minutes later with coffee and a book. She'd started bringing novels to read aloud during his treatments, trashy thrillers mostly, the kind with ridiculous plot twists and improbable action sequences. It helped. Gave him something to focus on besides the poison dripping into his veins. Where'd we leave off? She asked, settling into the chair beside him. The detective just discovered his partner was actually the killer's twin brother. Right, the completely predictable twist. She cracked open the book. Chapter 18. Her voice washed over him, steady and familiar. Around them, the infusion center hummed with quiet activity. An elderly man 2 chairs down was asleep, mouth open, while his wife knitted beside him. A younger woman across the aisle typed furiously on her laptop, IV pole, standing sentinel. Everyone here fighting their own battle, carrying their own fear. But Caleb didn't feel quite so alone anymore. Halfway through the session, the nausea hit hard. Jessica adjusted his meds, but it took longer to settle this time. Ivy set the book aside and held his hand through it, her thumb tracing patterns on his wrist. "Breathe," she murmured. "In through your nose, out through your mouth. You've got this." He didn't feel like he had this. He felt like he was drowning, like his body was betraying him 1 cell at a time. But Ivy's hand was solid and real, and he focused on that. The warmth of her skin, the steady pressure of her grip. Eventually, the worst passed. Caleb sagged back in the chair, wrung out. "Sorry," he muttered. "For what?" "Being pathetic." "You're not pathetic. You're sick. There's a difference." She squeezed his hand. "Want me to keep reading?" "Yeah. Distract me from my own body." She picked up the book again, found her place, and continued the story. By the time his treatment finished 3 hours later, the detective had solved the case. The twin brother had been arrested, and Caleb felt like he'd been hit by a truck. Ivy drove him home. That had become routine too, neither of them bothering to pretend he was okay to drive himself anymore. Mrs. Chen had picked up Mara from school and was waiting at the apartment with dinner already made. "You look terrible," Mrs. Chen announced when she saw him. "Thanks. Love you too. Go lie down. I'll stay until Ivy gets back from parking." He didn't argue, just stumbled to his bedroom and collapsed face first on the mattress. He woke up to voices in the living room, Ivy and Mrs. Chen talking quietly. The sky outside had gone dark. His phone said it was 8:30. He'd been out for over 2 hours. Caleb dragged himself upright and made his way down the hall. Mara was asleep on the couch, curled under a blanket. Ivy and Mrs. Chen stood by the door, speaking in low tones. "Need more help than this?" Mrs. Chen was saying. "She's a good girl, but she's doing too much. This is not sustainable." "I know. I'm working on it." "Working on what?" Caleb asked. Both women turned. Mrs. Chen looked him up and down with her usual no-nonsense assessment. "You need live-in help. Someone who can be here when you can't function. Someone who can take care of Mara." "I can't afford that." "Then you find a way." Mrs. Chen grabbed her purse. "I love that child, but I'm 74 years old. I cannot be running over here every day picking up the pieces. You need real support." She left in a swirl of practical concern, the door clicking shut behind her. Ivy was watching him carefully. "She's right, you know." "I know." Caleb ran a hand through his hair. "But what am I supposed to do? Hire a full-time nanny on my salary? Even with insurance covering treatment, I'm drowning in medical bills. I can't. What if I moved in?" The words hung in the air between them. "What? What if I moved in?" Ivy repeated, more firmly this time. "Temporarily, until you're through the worst of this. I'm already here most days anyway. It would make logistics easier." "Ivy, that's insane." "Why? I have a studio I barely use. My lease is up next month anyway. I could sublet it, move in here, help with Mara and cooking, and everything else that's falling through the cracks." She crossed her arms. "It makes sense." "It makes no sense. You can't just upend your entire life because I'm sick." "I'm not upending my life. I'm adjusting it. There's a difference." "You barely know me." "I know you well enough." She held his gaze. "I know you're a good father. I know you're stubborn as hell. I know you need help whether you want to admit it or not. And I know I want to be here." Caleb shook his head, overwhelmed. "This is too much. I can't ask you to do this." "You're not asking. I'm offering." "Why?" "Because—" She stopped, seemed to be weighing her words. "Because watching you try to do this alone is killing me almost as much as the cancer is killing you. And because Mara needs stability, and you need support, and I can provide both of those things." A pause. "And because I care about you, you stubborn idiot." Is that reason enough? His chest felt tight. People don't just move in with sick coworkers out of the goodness of their hearts. No, they don't. They move in with people they care about, people who matter to them. Ivy stepped closer. You matter to me, Caleb. You and Mara both. And I'm tired of pretending this is just me being a good Samaritan. I want to be here, not out of obligation, not out of pity, because I want to. I don't understand why. Maybe you don't need to understand. Maybe you just need to accept it. Caleb looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who had pushed her way into his life when he was at his lowest, who had refused to let him fall apart alone, who was now standing in his living room offering to completely rearrange her existence for him. It terrified him, but it also felt like the first real hope he'd had in months. Okay, he heard himself say. Ivy blinked. Okay? Okay, move in, help, stay. He swallowed hard. Please. Her face broke into a smile, genuine and bright. Yeah? Yeah, but I have conditions. Of course you do. You get the bedroom. Mara and I can share. There's room for a second bed in there. And you pay rent. I'm not a charity case. Caleb, those are my terms. Take them or leave them. Ivy considered for a moment, then nodded. Fine, but I'm also grocery shopping and cooking, and you don't get to argue about that. Deal. They shook on it, formal and ridiculous, and then Ivy pulled him into a hug that felt like relief and terrified hope, all wrapped together. We're going to get through this, she murmured against his shoulder. Caleb closed his eyes and let himself believe it. 2 weeks later, Ivy moved in with 3 suitcases, 2 boxes of books, and a determination that would have been frightening if it wasn't so desperately needed. Mara was ecstatic. She helped Ivy unpack, chattering nonstop about how they could share her dinosaur collection, and maybe Ivy could read her bedtime stories when Daddy was too tired, and could they have pancakes for breakfast every day? Not every day, Ivy said, hanging shirts in the closet. But sometimes, special occasions. What's a special occasion? Tuesdays, Mara giggled. That's silly. Life's silly, kid. Might as well embrace it. Caleb watched from the doorway, still processing this new reality. Ivy Carter, the woman who used to argue with him about project timelines, was now folding laundry and promising his daughter Tuesday pancakes. How had his life become this strange? That first night felt surreal. They had dinner together. Ivy made tacos, and Mara got more cheese on herself than in the tortilla. Afterward, Ivy helped with bath time while Caleb cleaned up, and then they took turns reading bedtime stories until Mara finally crashed with Larry tucked under one arm. When they emerged from Mara's room, the apartment felt different, fuller, less lonely. This is weird, Caleb said. Good weird or bad weird? I don't know yet. Ivy smiled. Fair enough. She grabbed her laptop from her bag. I'm going to finish some work emails. You should rest. I'm fine. Caleb. Okay, I'm exhausted and feel like I got hit by a bus, but I can sit on the couch with you. As long as you're sitting. They settled into an easy silence, Ivy typing away while Caleb pretended to watch TV and mostly just watched her. She worked with total focus, occasionally muttering at her screen, her hair falling forward to obscure her face. You're staring, she said without looking up. Just trying to figure out if you're real. Flesh and blood, unfortunately. Would be much easier if I were a robot. Robots don't make tacos. Good point. She closed her laptop and turned to face him. How are you really feeling? And don't give me the tough guy answer. Caleb considered lying, but what was the point? Scared, tired, grateful, all of it at once. Grateful for what? For you, for this, for not having to do it alone anymore. He met her eyes. I know I haven't said it enough, but thank you for everything. You don't have to thank me. Yeah, I do. You turned your entire life upside down for us. Maybe my life needed turning upside down. Ivy tucked her feet under her. I've spent the last 2 years throwing myself into work, avoiding anything real or complicated. This is the first time in a long time I've felt like I'm actually living instead of just existing. Even though it involves watching me slowly disintegrate, you're not disintegrating. You're fighting. There's a difference. She reached over and took his hand. And for what it's worth, I think you're pretty damn brave. I don't feel brave. Brave people never do. That's kind of the whole point. They sat like that for a while, hands linked, the TV murmuring in the background. It should have felt awkward, this new arrangement, this undefined thing between them. But somehow, it just felt right. Ivy? Yeah? I'm glad you're here. She squeezed his hand. Me too. The days fell into a new rhythm. Ivy got Mara ready for school while Caleb rested. She worked from the apartment when he had treatment, went into the office when he felt strong enough to manage on his own. She cooked dinner every night, even when he could barely eat. She read to Mara, helped with homework, became the steady presence that held everything together, and slowly, without either of them quite acknowledging it, something shifted. It started small. Ivy's hand on his shoulder when she passed him in the kitchen. Caleb making her coffee exactly how she liked it without being asked. The way they moved around each other in the small space, learning each other's rhythms and patterns. Then bigger things. The night Caleb woke from a nightmare, gasping and disoriented, and Ivy appeared in the doorway asking if he was okay. The way she stayed and talked until his heart stopped racing. The morning she overslept and came stumbling out in pajamas, and Caleb thought she'd never looked more beautiful, rumpled and human and real. Mara noticed. Of course she did. Are you and Ivy going to get married? She asked one morning over cereal. Caleb choked on his coffee. What? Sophie says when grown-ups live together and like each other, they get married. It's not that simple, Bug. Why not? Because I'm sick, and Ivy's just helping us out. Mara frowned, considering this. But she likes you, and you like her, I can tell. Out of the mouths of 5-year-olds. It's complicated. Grown-ups always say that when they don't want to explain things. She wasn't wrong. That evening, after Mara was asleep, Caleb found Ivy on the couch, reading. We need to talk, he said. She looked up, instantly alert. That sounds ominous. Mara asked me this morning if we're getting married. Ivy's eyebrows shot up. Oh, yeah. He sat down, suddenly nervous. I told her it was complicated, but the thing is... He trailed off, unsure how to finish. The thing is what? The thing is, it kind of isn't. Complicated, I mean. He forced himself to meet her eyes. I care about you, Ivy. More than I probably should, given everything that's happening, and I don't know what to do with that. Ivy set her book aside carefully. What do you want to do with it? I don't know. I'm terrified of dragging you further into this mess. I'm terrified of getting worse and you having to watch it. I'm terrified that I'm going to... He stopped, unable to say the words. That you're going to die and leave me behind, Ivy finished quietly. Yeah. Caleb. She shifted closer. I'm already in this. I moved into your apartment. I take care of your daughter. I sit with you through chemo. You're not dragging me anywhere I haven't already chosen to go. But if things get worse, then we deal with it together. That's what this is. She took his hand. I'm not here because I think you're going to magically get better and everything will be perfect. I'm here because right now, in this moment, I want to be. And whatever comes next, we'll face it, together. That's not fair to you. Let me decide what's fair to me. Her grip tightened. I know the risks. I know this is hard and scary and uncertain, but I'd rather have this, whatever this is, than nothing at all. Caleb looked at their joined hands, her fingers laced through his, and felt something loosen in his chest. For so long, he'd been trying to protect everyone else from his reality. But maybe that wasn't what they needed. Maybe what they all needed was just to be honest about it. I don't know if I'm going to make it through this, he said quietly. I know? And that doesn't scare you away? It terrifies me, but I'm staying anyway. She met his eyes. Because you're worth it. This is worth it. Even if we only get a little time, even then. Something in Caleb broke, or maybe healed. The walls he'd been holding up, the armor he'd worn for so long, crumbled under the weight of her certainty. He leaned forward and kissed her. It wasn't dramatic or movie perfect. His lips were dry from medication, and he probably tasted like the anti-nausea pills he'd taken an hour ago. But Ivy kissed him back like none of that mattered. her hand coming up to cup his face, and for the first time in months, Caleb felt like he was alive instead of just surviving. When they finally pulled apart, Ivy was smiling. "Took you long enough," she said. "I'm a slow learner." "I noticed." She kissed him again, softer this time. "For the record, I care about you too. A lot. Probably more than is sensible." "Good. Because I think I'm falling for you, and it would be really awkward if it was one-sided." Ivy laughed, and the sound filled all the empty spaces in his chest. "Yeah, that would be pretty awkward." They stayed up too late talking, kissing, figuring out what this meant and where they went from here. Not planning a future, that felt too presumptuous, too much like tempting fate. But acknowledging that there was something between them, something real and worth holding on to. When Caleb finally fell asleep that night, it was with Ivy's hand in his and hope settling like a fragile bird in his chest. For the first time since his diagnosis, tomorrow didn't feel quite so terrifying. He wasn't facing it alone anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The next morning, Mara found them asleep on the couch, Caleb's head on Ivy's shoulder, her arm wrapped around him like she was afraid he might disappear. His daughter stood there in her dinosaur pajamas, staring at them with the kind of intensity only a 5-year-old could muster. "I knew it," she whispered to Larry. Caleb's eyes opened. For a second, he forgot where he was, forgot the warmth beside him, forgot everything except the bone-deep exhaustion that had become his constant companion. Then he saw Mara's face, smug and delighted, and reality came crashing back. "Morning, Bug." "You fell asleep with Ivy." "We were talking late." "Uh-huh." Mara climbed onto the couch, wedging herself between them without ceremony. "Can we have pancakes? It's Tuesday." Ivy stirred, blinking awake. Her hair was a mess, and there was a crease on her cheek from the couch cushion. "Did someone say pancakes? You promised. Special occasions. It's Tuesday." "So I did." Ivy stretched, wincing. Note to self, couches are terrible beds. They made pancakes together. The three of them crowded into the small kitchen. Mara insisted on helping flip them, which resulted in one landing on the floor and another stuck to the ceiling. Ivy laughed so hard she had to sit down. Caleb watched them, his daughter and this woman who had somehow become essential, and felt something dangerous settle in his chest. Love. Or the beginning of it, anyway. He'd loved Mara's mother once, in the desperate way of people too young to know better. That had ended badly, with her walking out when Mara was 18 months old, leaving him alone with a toddler and no idea what he was doing. He'd sworn after that to keep his heart locked down, to focus only on his daughter, to never risk that kind of devastation again. But Ivy had bypassed every defense he'd built without even trying. "Earth to Caleb," Ivy said, waving a spatula in his direction. "You want chocolate chips or blueberries?" Chocolate," Mara answered for him. "I didn't ask you, monster." "But he likes chocolate. Right, Daddy?" "Right," Caleb confirmed, still watching Ivy move around his kitchen like she owned it. After breakfast, Ivy left for the office while Caleb got Mara ready for school. The routine was familiar now. Backpack, lunchbox, permission slips, the endless parade of small tasks that made up parenting. But today felt different. Lighter, maybe. Or just less lonely. "Daddy?" Mara asked from his back seat as he drove. "Yeah, Bug? Are you going to marry Ivy?" "Not this again." "Why are you so obsessed with marriage?" "Sophie says people who like each other get married, and then they have babies." "Are you going to have a baby?" Caleb nearly drove off the road. "No, no babies. I can barely handle you." "I'd be a good big sister." "I'm sure you would. But let's focus on getting me through treatment first, okay?" Mara was quiet for a moment. Then, in a smaller voice, "Are you going to get better?" The question punched the air from his lungs. He'd been so careful, trying to shield her from the worst of his fear, keeping the conversations age-appropriate and optimistic. But kids were perceptive. They saw more than adults gave them credit for. "I'm trying my hardest," he said carefully. "The medicine is tough, but it's helping." Sophie's grandpa had cancer. He died. Caleb pulled into the school parking lot and put the car in park. Then he turned to face his daughter, who was clutching Larry with white knuckles. "Come here." She unbuckled and climbed into the front seat, curling against him. He wrapped his arms around her small, solid body and felt the weight of every promise he might not be able to keep. "I'm not going anywhere," he said into her hair. "Not if I can help it." "But what if you can't help it? Then Ivy will take care of you, and Mrs. Chen, and you'll be okay. I don't want to be okay without you." "I know, Bug. I know." He held her tighter. "But I need you to be brave for me. Can you do that?" She nodded against his chest, and he felt the dampness of tears soaking through his shirt. They sat like that until the first bell rang. Then Mara pulled back, wiped her face with her sleeve, and grabbed her backpack. "Love you, Daddy. Love you more." She ran toward the building, joining the stream of other kids, and Caleb sat alone in the car, feeling like the worst father in the world. How was he supposed to protect her from this? From the probability, if he was honest, that he might not make it? His phone buzzed. Ivy. How'd drop-off go? He stared at the message, debating how much to share. Finally typed, "She asked if I'm going to die." The response came immediately. "What did you tell her?" "That I'm trying not to." Good answer. "You okay?" Was he? Caleb looked at the school building, at all the normal parents dropping off their normal kids for another normal day. He used to be one of them. Now he was the dad with cancer, the single father falling apart, the cautionary tale people whispered about. "No," he typed, "but I will be. Coming home early. Be there by noon. You don't have to... Too late. Already told Richard I have a thing." Despite everything, Caleb smiled. He spent the morning trying to work from home, but his concentration was shot. The spreadsheets blurred together. The emails might as well have been written in another language. Finally, he gave up and lay down on the couch, staring at the ceiling and trying not to think about the conversation with Mara. Ivy arrived at 11:30 with Thai food and a determined expression. "You look like hell," she said, setting the bags on the counter. "Thanks. You really know how to make a guy feel special." "I'm serious." She sat beside him on the couch, hand going automatically to his forehead like she was checking for fever. "What happened with Mara?" So he told her about the questions, the tears, the fear in his daughter's eyes that mirrored his own. Ivy listened without interrupting, her hand moving to his shoulder, then his back, offering comfort through touch. "She's terrified of losing you," Ivy said when he finished. "I know. And you're terrified of leaving her." "Yeah. So we make sure that doesn't happen." She said it with such certainty, like willpower alone could alter the course of cancer. "It's not that simple. Nothing worth doing is simple." Ivy shifted closer. "Look, I know the odds. I've done the research. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer is brutal. But you know what else I know? You're stubborn as hell. You have a kid who needs you, and you've got me in your corner. That's got to count for something." "You can't love someone into remission, Ivy." "Maybe not, but I can make sure you don't give up." She took his hand. "Promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you won't stop fighting. Not because of fear, not because you think you're protecting Mara by preparing her for the worst. You fight like your life depends on it because it does." "I'm tired," Caleb admitted. "I'm so fucking tired of feeling like this." "I know, but you're still here. You're still getting up every day, going to treatment, being a father. That's fighting, even when it doesn't feel like it." He wanted to believe her, wanted to feel the conviction she projected so effortlessly. But all he felt was worn down, hollowed out, like the cancer was eating away at more than just his pancreas. "What if I can't do this?" The question came out barely above a whisper. "Then I'll carry you until you can." Ivy's voice was fierce. "That's what this is, Caleb. You don't have to be strong all the time. You can lean on me. You can fall apart. But you don't get to give up." Something in him cracked. The dam he'd been holding up for weeks, months, really, finally broke. He pulled Ivy against him and let himself cry, deep, wrenching sobs that hurt his chest and made his whole body shake. She held him through it, one hand in his hair, the other rubbing circles on his back, murmuring words he couldn't quite hear but felt anyway. When he finally pulled back, face wet and eyes swollen, she was still there. still looking at him like he was worth saving. "Sorry," he managed. "Don't apologize for being human." She wiped his face with her sleeve. "Feel better?" "A little." "Good. Now eat something. I got you pad thai with extra peanuts." They ate in comfortable silence, and Caleb realized this was what he'd been missing all along. Not someone to fix everything, but someone to sit with him in the mess. Someone who didn't need him to be strong or perfect or okay. Someone who just needed him to be. The fourth round of chemo hit like a freight train. Caleb knew it was coming. Jessica had warned him that cumulative toxicity was a real thing, that each treatment would likely get harder as his body struggled to recover. But knowing it intellectually and living it were two different things. He spent 3 days in bed, unable to keep anything down, every muscle aching like he'd been beaten. Ivy took time off work, camping out in the bedroom with her laptop, working while he drifted in and out of sleep. She brought water, medication, cool cloths for his forehead. She didn't complain when he snapped at her, didn't leave when he told her to. On the third night, his fever spiked to 103. "We need to go to the hospital," Ivy said, phone already in hand. "I'm fine." "You're burning up and haven't kept down food in 3 days. That's not fine." She was already calling, talking to the oncology triage nurse, explaining symptoms. Caleb wanted to argue, but didn't have the energy. When Ivy helped him to the car, he leaned heavily on her, grateful for the support even as pride screamed at him to stand on his own. The emergency room was chaos, crying babies, drunk college kids, an elderly man clutching his chest. They got Caleb triaged quickly once the word chemotherapy came up. Within an hour, he was in a bed with an IV pumping fluids and antibiotics into his system. Dr. Morrison appeared around midnight, looking tired but concerned. "Your white blood cell count is in the basement," she said, reviewing his chart. "You've got an infection brewing, probably from the chemo suppressing your immune system. We're going to keep you at least 48 hours, get the fever down, make sure nothing else is going on. I need to get home to my daughter." "Your daughter needs you alive," Morrison said bluntly. 2 days, Caleb. Let us do our job." Ivy squeezed his hand. "I've got Mara. Mrs. Chen already said she'd help. You focus on getting better." He wanted to argue, but the fever was making everything fuzzy around the edges. Instead, he just nodded and let the exhaustion pull him under. He woke periodically over the next 2 days, to nurses checking vitals, to Ivy sleeping in the chair beside his bed, to Dr. Morrison updating him on lab results. The infection responded to antibiotics. His fever broke. Slowly, painfully, his body clawed its way back from the edge. On the second night, he found Ivy awake, staring at her phone with red eyes. "What's wrong?" She looked up, startled. "Nothing. Go back to sleep." "Ivy," she sighed, setting the phone down. "I was reading about pancreatic cancer survival rates. Stupid thing to do at 2 a.m, but here we are. And they're not great." Her voice wavered. 5-year survival for stage 3 is around 20%. Most people don't make it past 2 years. Caleb had read the same statistics, had memorized them, in fact, during those dark early days after diagnosis. "I know," he said quietly. "How are you not terrified all the time?" "Who says I'm not?" Ivy looked at him, really looked at him, and he saw his own fear reflected back. She was scared, for him, for Mara, for whatever future they might or might not have. "Come here," he said, patting the narrow hospital bed. "There's no room." "Come here anyway." She climbed in carefully, curling against his side, her head on his chest. He wrapped an arm around her, feeling the tremor in her body that meant she was trying not to cry. "I can't lose you," she whispered. "You barely have me." "That's not true." "I have you. Right now, in this moment, I have you." And the thought of that ending, her voice broke. Caleb held her tighter. "I'm still here. I'm still fighting. But what if it's not enough?" "Then it's not enough. But we don't know that yet." He kissed the top of her head. "We take it one day at a time. That's all we can do. I'm not good at uncertainty. No one is. But you're good at showing up. And right now, that's what matters." They fell asleep like that, tangled together in a hospital bed that was definitely not designed for 2 people, holding on to each other like lifelines. When Dr. Morrison discharged him the next morning, she pulled Ivy aside. "He needs to be careful," Caleb heard her say. "Any fever over 100.4, you bring him straight back. No exceptions. His immune system is compromised, and another infection like this could be serious." "I understand. And make sure he rests. I know that's easier said than done. But he needs to let his body recover between treatments. I'll sit on him if I have to." Morrison smiled. "I believe you would. He's lucky to have you." Ivy glanced at Caleb through the doorway, her expression unreadable. "I'm the lucky one." Home felt different after the hospital. Smaller, maybe, or just more precious. Mara launched herself at Caleb the second he walked through the door, nearly knocking him over. "Easy, bug. I'm still fragile." "I missed you." "Missed you too." He hugged her, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. Mrs. Chen had left a casserole in the fridge with reheating instructions. Ivy got him settled on the couch, while Mara chattered about everything that had happened while he was gone. A science project, a new dinosaur book from the library, Sophie losing a tooth, normal kid stuff, the kind of mundane details that used to bore him and now felt like lifelines to a world he was afraid of leaving. That night, after Mara was asleep, Ivy found him on the couch, staring at nothing. "Penny for your thoughts," she said. "Just thinking about time. How much of it we waste on stupid things, and how you never realize it until you're running out. Deep thoughts for a Tuesday night. I'm a deep guy." "You're an idiot." She sat beside him. "But you're my idiot." "Is that what I am? Yours?" "If you want to be." Caleb turned to face her. "I don't have much to offer right now. Sick body, uncertain future, 5-year-old daughter with more energy than the sun. Not exactly a prize package." "Good thing I'm not interested in prizes." Ivy took his hand. "I just want you. Whatever version of you exists right now, in this moment, that's enough. Even if this moment is all we get, even then." She leaned in, kissing him softly. "Though for the record, I'm planning on a lot more moments. You don't get to die on me, Hayes. I just bought new furniture for this place." He laughed despite himself. "Your priorities are very clear." "Damn right they are." She pulled him closer. "Now stop being morbid and watch terrible TV with me." They ended up watching a cooking competition show, arguing about whose dish looked better and whether the judges were being fair. It was normal and ridiculous and perfect. For a few hours, Caleb forgot he was sick. He just was. The next round of treatment loomed 2 weeks away. In the meantime, Caleb tried to rebuild his strength, eating when he could stomach it, resting when exhaustion overwhelmed him, spending every spare moment with Mara. But something had shifted after the hospital stay. He felt it in the way Ivy watched him, in the concern that flickered across her face when she thought he wasn't looking. She was scared he'd get worse, scared the next infection would be the one that did him in. He was scared too. On a Saturday afternoon, while Mara was at a birthday party, Ivy brought it up. "We need to talk about contingencies." "That sounds ominous." "I'm serious, Caleb. What happens to Mara if you—" She stopped, unable to finish. "If I die?" Yeah. It was the question he'd been avoiding for months. The one that kept him up at night, staring at the ceiling, feeling panic claw at his throat. "I don't have family," he said slowly. "No siblings. Parents are gone. Her mother signed away her rights 3 years ago and hasn't been in contact since. Legally, she'd probably go into foster care." Ivy went very still. "That's not happening." "I don't have a choice." "Yes, you do." She grabbed his hands. "Make me her guardian, legally. Whatever needs to happen to make sure she stays with me if something happens to you." Caleb stared at her. "That's insane. Why?" "Because we've been together for what, a month? Less? You can't just take on someone else's kid because you feel bad." "I don't feel bad. I love her." Ivy's voice was fierce. "And I love you, you stubborn asshole. So if the worst happens, I'm not letting Mara go into the system. She stays with me. Period." "Ivy, don't argue with me on this, please." Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I know it's fast, I know it's crazy, but I can't stand the thought of her being alone if you're not here. Let me do this. Let me be her safety net. Caleb felt something crack open in his chest. You love me? Of course I love you. How is that even a question? We've never said it. Well, I'm saying it now. I love you. I love Mara. I love this weird little life we've built together, and I'm not losing any of it without a fight. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight he could feel her heartbeat against his chest. I love you too. In case that wasn't obvious. It wasn't, actually. You're very emotionally constipated. I'm working on it. They sat like that for a long time, wrapped around each other, acknowledging the terrifying depth of feeling that had grown between them. Finally, Caleb pulled back. Okay. Okay, what? Okay, I'll talk to a lawyer, set up guardianship papers, make it legal. Ivy's face broke into a smile even as tears spilled over. Yeah? Yeah, thank you for loving us, for wanting to protect her, even if... His voice caught. Even if... Ivy finished. But let's work on making sure that if never happens. The lawyer appointment happened the following week. Caleb sat in an office that smelled like old books and furniture polish, signing papers that named Ivy as Mara's legal guardian in the event of his death. It felt surreal and final and necessary all at once. I need to tell her, he said on the drive home. Mara, she deserves to know. Are you sure? No, but it's the right thing to do. That night after dinner, Caleb sat Mara down in her room. Ivy hovered in the doorway, giving them space but staying close. Bug, we need to talk about something important. Mara looked up from her dinosaurs with wide eyes. Am I in trouble? No, nothing like that. He took a breath. You know I'm sick, right? And that I'm getting medicine to try to make me better? She nodded slowly. Well, sometimes the medicine doesn't work the way we want it to. And if that happens, if I get too sick to take care of you, I need to know you'll be okay. Where would I go? You'd stay with Ivy. She's going to be your guardian, which means she'll take care of you if I can't. Mara looked past him to where Ivy stood. Forever? Forever, Ivy confirmed, voice steady despite the tears on her face. Do I have to call you Mom? The question surprised both of them. Ivy moved into the room, kneeling beside Mara. You can call me whatever you want. Ivy is fine. Mom is fine. My name is fine. Whatever feels right to you. Mara considered this seriously. Then, can I call you Ivy, Mom? Yeah, kid, you can call me that. Okay. Mara went back to arranging her dinosaurs, seemingly satisfied. But then she looked up at Caleb. Are you going to die? There it was again. The question that had no good answer. I'm trying really hard not to, Caleb said honestly. But I wanted you to know that if something happens, you'll be safe. Ivy will take care of you. Promise? Promise. Mara threw her arms around him, squeezing tight. Ivy joined them, wrapping her arms around both of them, and they stayed like that until Mara pulled away. Can I finish my dinosaur battle now? Yeah, Bug, go ahead. In the hallway, Ivy leaned against the wall and let out a shaky breath. That was brutal, she said. Tell me about it. Caleb scrubbed his hands over his face. But it's done? She knows. Ivy Mom, Ivy repeated, smiling through tears. I'm Ivy Mom now. Apparently, you okay with that? More than okay. She reached for his hand. I meant what I said. If something happens to you, she's mine. I'll love her like she's my own. I know you will. That's why I trust you with her. They stood there in the dim hallway, holding hands, acknowledging the weight of what they'd just committed to. It should have felt overwhelming. Instead, it felt right. Later that night, after Mara was asleep and they were lying in bed, Caleb finally said what had been building in his chest all day. I don't want to die. Then don't, Ivy said simply. It's not that easy. I know, but you're not dead yet. You're here with me, and we're going to fight like hell to keep it that way. She rolled to face him. One more round of chemo, then scans to see if it's working. We take it step by step. And if the scans are bad, then we figure out plan B, but we don't borrow trouble. She kissed him, slow and deliberate. Right now, in this moment, you're alive. So let's act like it. He pulled her closer, kissing her back with an intensity that surprised them both. She responded in kind, her hands finding the hem of his shirt, and for a while there was nothing but skin and breath, and the desperate need to feel alive. Afterward, tangled together in sheets that smelled like laundry detergent and hope, Caleb felt something settle in his chest. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, didn't know if treatment was working or if he was fighting a losing battle. But right now, in this moment, he had Ivy warm against him and his daughter sleeping safely down the hall. Right now, he had everything that mattered. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to keep fighting for. The 5th round of chemo came on a Thursday that felt like any other Thursday until it didn't. Caleb woke feeling almost normal. A relative term these days, but he'd take it. His stomach wasn't churning. His head didn't feel like it was stuffed with cotton. He managed toast and coffee without immediately regretting it. "You look almost human," Ivy observed from across the kitchen table. "Thanks, I think." "I'm serious, you've got color in your face." She reached across to touch his cheek. "When's the last time that happened?" He couldn't remember. The last few months had blurred together into an endless cycle of treatment and recovery, good days and terrible ones, moments of hope punctuated by crushing fear. "Don't jinx it," he said. Mara bounded into the kitchen, already dressed for school, backpack dragging behind her. "Can Ivy Mom braid my hair today? You always make it crooked." Caleb looked at Ivy, who was trying not to smile. The name had stuck. Ivy Mom, said as one word, like it was her actual title. His daughter had taken to it immediately, and Ivy had stopped correcting her after the first day. "Sure, Bug. Ivy Mom's better at hair anyway." "Everyone's better at hair than you, Daddy." "Wow, attacked in my own kitchen." Ivy laughed and pulled Mara onto her lap, fingers already working through the tangles. Caleb watched them. His 2 girls, he'd started thinking of them, and felt that dangerous flutter of hope again. What if he actually made it through this? What if they got to keep this? The infusion center was busy when they arrived. Jessica greeted Caleb with her usual efficiency, getting him settled in his chair by the window. Ivy had come straight from dropping Mara at school, her work bag slung over one shoulder. "You don't have to stay the whole time," Caleb said as she settled into the chair beside him. "I know you have that presentation this afternoon. I rescheduled it. Ivy, don't start. I'm staying." She pulled out her laptop. "Besides, you need someone to make sure you actually eat the snacks I packed." "I eat." "You pick at food like a bird and call it eating, not the same thing." Jessica laughed as she accessed his port. "I like her. She keeps you honest." "She's a pain in my ass." "I can hear you," Ivy said without looking up from her screen. The treatment started, poison dripping into his veins with the same steady rhythm it had for months now. Caleb leaned back and closed his eyes, trying not to think about what this was doing to his body. The cure that might be killing him as surely as the disease. An hour in, Dr. Morrison appeared. That was unusual. She typically didn't check in during infusions unless something was wrong. "Caleb, Ivy." She nodded to both of them. "Mind if I sit?" Caleb's stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I wanted to talk to you about your scans." "They're not scheduled for 2 more weeks." "I know, but I've been reviewing your recent labs and I think we should move them up. Your tumor markers have been dropping consistently over the last month. I want to see what's happening inside." Ivy's hand found Caleb's. "Dropping is good, right?" "Dropping is very good. It suggests the chemo is working." Morrison pulled up something on her tablet. "See this? Your CA-19-9 started at 847. Last week it was down to 312. That's significant." Caleb stared at the numbers, afraid to let himself believe what they might mean. "So the cancer is shrinking?" "That's what I want to find out. If the scans show tumor reduction, we might be looking at surgical options. Maybe not a cure, but a chance to remove the bulk of the disease and give you more time." More time, the words hung in the air between them, precious and fragile. "When?" Ivy asked. "I can get you in tomorrow for a CT scan. Results should be back by Monday." Morrison looked at Caleb. "I know this is scary, but these numbers are the best news we've had since your diagnosis. Let's see what we're working with." After she left, Caleb sat frozen, the IV still dripping, his mind racing. "This is good," Ivy said quietly. "This is really good." Or it's nothing. Numbers can be misleading. The scans might show the tumor's still growing, just producing fewer markers. Or they might show it's shrinking. She squeezed his hand. "You're allowed to hope, you know. Hope feels dangerous. Everything worth having is dangerous." Ivy leaned closer. "Let yourself believe this might work. Just for today. We'll deal with reality on Monday." So Caleb tried to let the possibility settle in his chest without immediately crushing it with pessimism. Tried to imagine a future that extended beyond the next few months. Tried to believe that maybe, just maybe, he was going to survive this. The scan the next day was routine. Lie still, hold your breath, try not to think about what the machine might reveal. Caleb had done it before, but this time felt different. This time there was hope attached to the procedure, and hope made everything scarier. Ivy sat in the waiting room, working on her laptop, but checking her phone every few minutes. When Caleb emerged, she stood immediately. "How'd it go?" "Fine. Same as always." He grabbed his jacket. "Now we wait until Monday. You want to get lunch?" "I want to go home and pretend this day isn't happening." They picked up Mara from school early, told her they were having a mental health afternoon, and spent the rest of the day watching movies and eating popcorn. Mara was delighted. Ivy kept shooting Caleb concerned looks. He ignored them all and focused on his daughter's running commentary about why the dinosaurs in Jurassic World were scientifically inaccurate. That night, after Mara was asleep, Ivy found him sitting on the floor of the bathroom, head in his hands. "Hey." She slid down beside him. "Talk to me. I can't do this." "Can't do what?" "Hope. Wait. Any of it." He looked at her, feeling the weight of the last 6 months pressing down. What if the scans are bad? What if Morrison was wrong and the cancer's everywhere, and I've got weeks instead of months? Then we deal with it, together. "I'm so tired of fighting." "I know." Ivy put her arm around him. "But you're almost there. One more weekend. Then we get answers." "What if I don't want answers? What if I want to stay in this moment where there's still possibility?" "That's not how life works." "I know." He leaned against her. "I'm scared, Ivy." "Me too." They sat on the cold bathroom floor until Caleb's legs went numb, holding on to each other like it was the only thing keeping them tethered to reality. Saturday and Sunday crawled by with agonizing slowness. Caleb tried to distract himself with work, with Mara, with anything that would stop his brain from spiraling, but every quiet moment brought the fear rushing back. Monday morning arrived too fast and not fast enough. Dr. Morrison had scheduled the appointment for 10. Ivy took the day off, asked Mrs. Chen to handle Mara pickup, and drove them to the cancer center in tense silence. They checked in, sat in the waiting room with a dozen other people waiting for their own verdicts, and tried not to watch the clock. "Caleb Hayes?" The nurse led them back to Morrison's office. The doctor was already there, pulling up images on her computer screen. Her face was neutral, giving nothing away. "Thanks for coming in," she said, gesturing for them to sit. "I wanted to go over these scans with you in person." Caleb couldn't breathe. Ivy's hand found his under the table, gripping tight enough to hurt. Morrison turned the screen so they could see. "This is your original scan from 6 months ago. The tumor was here, about 4 centimeters, wrapped around the superior mesenteric artery. Inoperable at that size and location." The image showed a dark mass, ugly and invasive. Caleb remembered the first time he'd seen it, the moment his life had split into before and after. "And this," Morrison continued, pulling up a second image, "is from Friday." Caleb stared. The mass was still there, but smaller, noticeably smaller. "It's shrunk," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "by about 40%, from 4 centimeters to roughly 2.5. Morrison's expression was cautiously optimistic. "The chemo is working, Caleb. Your body is responding." Ivy made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Caleb couldn't speak. "What does this mean?" Ivy asked. "Practically, it means we continue treatment, 2 more rounds to see if we can shrink it further. And then Morrison paused. Then we talk about surgery. If we can get it down to under 2 centimeters and separated from the artery, there's a surgical oncologist I work with who might be willing to attempt a Whipple procedure. What's that? Caleb managed. It's a complicated surgery. They'd remove the head of your pancreas, part of your small intestine, your gallbladder, and bile duct. It's major. Recovery is brutal, but if successful, it could give you years instead of months. Years. The word echoed in Caleb's head. Years with Mara. Years with Ivy. Years of life. The 5-year survival rate for patients who have successful surgery is around 30%, Morrison continued. Not great odds, but significantly better than without it. And you're young, otherwise healthy. Those factors work in your favor. What's the catch? Caleb asked, because there was always a catch. The catch is it's dangerous. There's a real risk of complications, infection, bleeding, organ failure. And even if the surgery goes perfectly, there's no guarantee the cancer won't come back. Morrison met his eyes. But right now, this is the best shot we have. Your body is responding to treatment. That's huge, Caleb. That's hope. Ivy was crying openly now, not even trying to hide it. Caleb felt numb, like his brain couldn't process what he was hearing. I need to think about it, he heard himself say. Of course, we have time. Let's get through the next 2 rounds first, see where we are. Morrison printed out copies of the scans. But Caleb, this is good news, really good news. Let yourself feel that. In the car, Ivy let out a shaky laugh. Holy shit. Yeah. The tumor's shrinking. The chemo's working. You might... She stopped, unable to finish. I might live, Caleb completed. Maybe. Definitely maybe, which is better than definitely not. She turned to him, eyes still wet. Do you know what this means? It means 2 more rounds of feeling like death, and then major surgery that might kill me anyway. It means there's a chance, a real one. She grabbed his face. You're gonna make it, Caleb. I can feel it. Don't jinx this. I'm not jinxing anything. I'm believing in you. She kissed him hard. We're going to beat this together. Caleb wanted to believe her, wanted to let the hope fully in instead of keeping it at arm's length. But 6 months of bad news had taught him to guard his heart. Still, driving home with Ivy's hand in his and scans in the back seat showing a shrinking tumor, he let himself feel the smallest spark of possibility. Maybe he would survive this. Maybe they would get their future after all. They told Mara that night after dinner. The medicine is working, Caleb explained, trying to keep it simple. The thing that's making me sick is getting smaller. So you're getting better? I'm getting there. I still have more treatment to do, but yeah, I'm getting better. Mara's face lit up. Does that mean you won't die? Leave it to a 5-year-old to cut straight to the heart of it. I'm going to try really hard not to, Caleb said. The doctors are helping, and Ivy Mom is taking good care of us, and we're all fighting together. Like the dinosaurs fighting the meteor? Exactly like that. Mara seemed satisfied with this explanation. She went back to coloring, humming to herself, while Caleb and Ivy exchanged glances over her head. Later, after bedtime stories and tucking her in, they collapsed on the couch together. That went better than expected, Ivy said. She's resilient. She gets that from you. Caleb laughed. I'm barely holding it together. You're here. You're fighting. That's resilience. Ivy shifted to face him. So surgery, are you going to do it? If I make it that far? When you make it that far? It's dangerous. Morrison said there are risks. There are risks to not doing it too, like dying. Ivy took his hand. I know you're scared, but if there's a chance this could give you years, real years, you have to take it. What if something goes wrong? What if I don't wake up? What if you do wake up? What if it works and you get to watch Mara grow up? What if we get to have a life together? She cupped his face. Stop catastrophizing and start imagining the good outcomes for once. I don't know how. Then I'll imagine them for both of us until you catch up. Caleb pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. She smelled like the coconut shampoo she'd left in his shower, The one that Mara had declared smelled like vacation, even though she'd never been on one. I love you, he said into her neck. I love you too. Which is why you're going to do this surgery and survive it and give me a chance to be annoyed with you for the next 50 years. 50 years? I'm ambitious. Despite everything, Caleb smiled. Okay. Okay, what? Okay, I'll do the surgery, if we get there, if the next 2 rounds keep working. Ivy pulled back to look at him. We'll get there, and it'll work, and you're going to be fine. You can't know that. Watch me. The 6th round of chemo was both easier and harder. Easier because Caleb knew what to expect, had learned to manage the side effects, had a support system in place. Harder because now there was something to lose. Before, he'd been fighting to stay alive. Now he was fighting for a future. The difference was terrifying. Jessica noticed immediately. You seem different today. Good different or bad different? Just different. Lighter, maybe? She finished accessing his port. Did something happen? The scans showed the tumor shrinking. They're talking about surgery. Caleb, that's amazing. She squeezed his shoulder. I knew you were a fighter. Ivy arrived with coffee and a smile. How are we feeling? Like I'm being poisoned for a good cause instead of just being poisoned. I'll take it. She settled into her chair. Want me to read, or do you want to talk? Read. Distract me. They'd finished the thriller series and moved on to science fiction, something about space pirates and found family that Mara would probably love in a few years. Ivy's voice washed over him as the chemo dripped and Caleb let himself drift. He woke to Ivy shaking his shoulder gently. Hey, treatment's done. How long was I out? About an hour. You needed the rest. She helped him to his feet. Ready to go home? Home. When had his apartment become home instead of just the place he lived? Probably around the same time Ivy had moved in and rearranged his kitchen cabinets and started leaving her books everywhere. That night, Caleb felt better than he had after previous treatments. Not good, but not completely destroyed either. He managed dinner with Mara and Ivy, laughed at his daughter's story about a boy in her class who ate paste, and even helped with the dishes. Look at you being functional, Ivy teased. Don't jinx it. I'm starting to think you don't believe in jinxes. You just like being pessimistic. Can it be both? She threw the dish towel at him. Go sit down before you fall down. I'll finish up. But Caleb didn't want to sit. He wanted to stand in his kitchen with this woman he loved, doing normal domestic things, pretending for a moment that his life wasn't balanced on a knife's edge. Dance with me, he said suddenly. Ivy turned. What? Dance with me, right here. There's no music. So, we'll make our own. He pulled out his phone, found a playlist, and held out his hand. Ivy stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Then she smiled and took his hand. They swayed in the kitchen to some song Caleb didn't know the name of, holding each other close while Mara watched from the doorway with wide eyes. You guys are being weird, she announced. Yep, Caleb agreed. Sometimes weird is good. Mara considered this, then shrugged and went back to her dinosaurs. Caleb pulled Ivy closer, breathing in the coconut smell of her hair, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For staying, for loving us, for making me believe I might actually make it. You're going to make it, Ivy said fiercely. I'm not letting you go. You're stuck with me, Hayes. Good. I don't want to be unstuck. They danced until the song ended, and then another one started, and they kept going until Caleb's legs gave out and Ivy had to help him to the couch. So much for being functional, he said. You lasted longer than I expected. Progress. The 7th and final round of chemo came 3 weeks later, and Caleb faced it with something that almost resembled optimism. Last one, Jessica said as she accessed his port. How does it feel? Terrifying. What if this one doesn't work as well? What if the tumor starts growing again? Or what if it keeps shrinking and you get your surgery? She smiled. Let's think positive. Easier said than done. But Caleb tried. Ivy read to him, and they talked between chapters about stupid things. What color they should paint Mara's room, whether pineapple belonged on pizza, if they should get a dog once Caleb was recovered. A dog? Caleb said. We can barely manage life as it is. A small dog, something that Mara can help take care of, teach her responsibility. She's 5, so we'll get a patient dog. Ivy grinned. Come on, every kid should have a dog. Did you have a dog? No, which is why I want one now. She closed her book. We're making plans, Caleb. Plans for the future. That's allowed now. He wanted to argue, to point out that nothing was guaranteed, that he still might not make it. But looking at Ivy's hopeful face, he couldn't do it. Okay, he said. A small dog. After surgery. If everything goes well. When everything goes well. You're very sure about this. One of us has to be. She leaned over and kissed him. I have faith in you, even when you don't have it in yourself. The treatment finished. Caleb felt the familiar wave of nausea, but it was manageable. Jessica gave him extra anti-nausea meds and instructions to call if anything felt off. Next stop, scans in 2 weeks, she said, and then we'll see where we are. 2 weeks, 14 days until they knew if the treatment had worked, if surgery was really an option, if Caleb had a future worth planning for. He could make it 14 days. The wait was excruciating. Caleb tried to stay busy with work, with Mara, with anything that would keep his mind from spiraling. But the anxiety was constant, a low hum in the background of everything he did. Ivy was relentlessly positive, which both helped and drove him crazy. Stop catastrophizing, she said for the 100th time. I'm not catastrophizing. I'm being realistic. You're imagining the worst-case scenario and treating it like it's already happened. That's catastrophizing. She wasn't wrong, but Caleb had spent 6 months preparing for the worst. It was hard to suddenly shift gears and hope for the best. The night before the scan, he barely slept. Ivy stayed up with him, talking about nothing and everything until the sky started to lighten outside. Whatever happens today, we handle it together, she said. Okay? Okay. The scan itself was routine. The wait for results was not. They sat in Dr. Morrison's office, the same office where Caleb had first heard his diagnosis, where he'd learned the tumor was shrinking, where his life had been repeatedly redefined, and waited. Morrison came in with her tablet and that same carefully neutral expression. So, she said, pulling up the images, let's see what we've got. She turned the screen. Caleb's heart stopped. The tumor was even smaller, barely 2 centimeters, and it had pulled away from the artery. It's operable, Morrison said, and her professional facade cracked into a genuine smile. Caleb, you did it. The chemo worked. We can do surgery. Ivy burst into tears. Caleb just stared at the screen, unable to process what he was seeing. When? He managed. I'll refer you to Dr. Chen. She's the best pancreatic surgeon in the state. She'll want to meet with you, go over the procedure, make sure you understand the risks. But if she agrees to take you on, we're looking at surgery within the next month. A month. 4 weeks until the operation that could save his life, or end it. What are the odds? Caleb asked. Really? Morrison was quiet for a moment. The surgery itself has about a 15% mortality rate, higher for pancreatic cases. But if you survive the surgery and recovery, your 5-year survival rate jumps to 30 to 40%. Those are the best odds you're going to get with this disease. 30 to 40%, not great, but infinitely better than the single-digit odds he'd been facing 6 months ago. I'll do it, Caleb said. You're sure? You should take time to think about it. Talk to Dr. Chen? I'm sure. He looked at Ivy, who was still crying, and then back at Morrison. I want the surgery. I want a chance. Morrison nodded. Then let's make it happen. Outside the office, Ivy threw her arms around Caleb and sobbed into his shoulder. You're going to make it, she kept saying. You're really going to make it. Caleb held her tight, finally letting himself believe it might be true. He was going to fight. He was going to have the surgery. And maybe, just maybe, he was going to survive. For Mara. For Ivy. For the life they were building together. He was going to live. They picked up Mara from school early, unable to wait another minute to share the news. She came running across the playground when she saw them, backpack bouncing, and launched herself at Caleb with her usual enthusiasm. "Why are you here?" she asked, suspicious. "Am I in trouble?" "No, Bug. We just have something to tell you." Caleb knelt down to her level, Ivy standing close beside him. "Remember how we talked about the medicine making the bad things smaller?" Mara nodded, eyes wide. "Well, it worked. It's small enough now that the doctors can do surgery to take it out. Surgery means they cut you open, right?" Sophie's mom had surgery on her knee and she had to use crutches. "Yeah, something like that, but bigger. They're going to take out the part that's making me sick. And then you'll be better?" Caleb exchanged a glance with Ivy. How did you explain to a 5-year-old that nothing was guaranteed, that he might not survive the operation, that even if he did, there was no promise the cancer wouldn't come back? "Then I'll have a chance to get better," he said carefully. "A really good chance." Mara seemed to consider this. Then she threw her arms around his neck and squeezed so tight he could barely breathe. "I love you, Daddy." "Love you too, Bug. So much." That night, after Mara was asleep, Caleb and Ivy sat at the kitchen table with a laptop open between them, reading everything they could find about Whipple procedures. The information was overwhelming and terrifying in equal measure. 8 to 10 hours of surgery, Ivy read aloud. 2 to 3 weeks in the hospital, 6 months recovery time. Possible complications include infection, bleeding, delayed gastric emptying, diabetes, malnutrition. She stopped. "This is a lot." "I know. Are you sure about this?" Caleb closed the laptop. "No, but what's my alternative? Wait for the cancer to grow back? Die in 6 months instead of potentially living for years?" He rubbed his face. "I'm terrified, but I'd be stupid not to try." "You're not stupid. You're brave." Ivy reached across the table for his hand. "And I'll be there, every step of the way." "What if something goes wrong?" "Then we deal with it." "But Caleb," she squeezed his fingers. "What if everything goes right? What if you wake up and the cancer is gone and you get to live?" "I don't know how to imagine that anymore." "Then let me imagine it for you." She stood, pulling him up with her. "I imagine you recovering, getting stronger, watching Mara grow up, maybe getting that dog we talked about, maybe more kids if you want them. Maybe just us, building a life together." Her voice caught. "I imagine growing old with you, Hayes, fighting about stupid things and laughing about everything and just being together." Caleb pulled her into his arms, holding on like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting under his feet. "I want that, all of it. Then fight for it." "I am. I will." They stood like that until Caleb's back started to ache and Ivy's phone buzzed with a work email she ignored. Then they went to bed and held each other in the dark, neither of them sleeping, both of them trying not to think about everything that could go wrong. The meeting with Dr. Chen happened 3 days later. She was younger than Caleb expected, maybe early 40s, with sharp eyes and an intensity that was somehow reassuring. She didn't sugarcoat anything. "The Whipple is one of the most complex abdominal surgeries we do," she said, pulling up a diagram on her computer. "I'll be removing the head of your pancreas, the first part of your small intestine, your gallbladder, and part of your bile duct. Then I reconnect everything so your digestive system can still function." Sounds simple once you put it that way, Caleb said. Chen smiled slightly. "It's not. The surgery takes 8 to 12 hours. You'll be in the ICU afterward for at least a few days. Recovery is brutal. You'll have drains, feeding tubes, pain management to figure out. Most patients don't feel remotely normal for 3 to 6 months. But if it works, and if the margins are clear, and if we get all the cancer, you could have years, maybe a decade or more. I've had patients who are 15 years post-op and still cancer-free." She paused. "I've also had patients who don't make it through surgery, or who develop complications, or whose cancer comes back within a year. I need you to understand both possibilities." Ivy spoke up from beside him. "What's your success rate?" "For pancreatic cancer specifically, about 85% of my patients survive the surgery itself. Of those, roughly 60% are still alive at the 5-year mark. Better than average, but still not great odds." "Better than the alternative," Caleb said. "That's my feeling too." Chen turned to face him directly. I've reviewed your scans and your history. You've responded remarkably well to chemo. Your tumor is in a good location now. You're young and otherwise healthy. If I didn't think you had a real shot at this, I wouldn't offer to do it. So you'll take me on? If you want me to, yes, but I need you to be sure. This isn't a decision you make lightly. Caleb looked at Ivy, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Then he looked back at Chen. I'm sure. When can we schedule it? How's 3 weeks from today? That gives you time to get your affairs in order, build up your strength, spend time with your family. 3 weeks. 21 days until his life changed one way or another. Let's do it. The next 3 weeks moved in a strange blur of too fast and not fast enough. Caleb had to meet with anesthesiologists, nutritionists, the hospital social worker. He had to sign consent forms that listed every possible complication in excruciating detail. He had to update his will, make sure Ivy's guardianship papers were filed, have conversations he'd hoped never to have. But he also had good days. Days where he felt almost normal, where he could take Mara to the park and push her on the swings until his arms hurt. Days where he and Ivy stayed up late talking about nothing, stealing moments of normalcy in the chaos. Days where he let himself believe he might actually survive this. A week before surgery, Richard called him into his office at work. I wanted to check in, his boss said, gesturing for Caleb to sit. See how you're doing, really doing, not the corporate appropriate answer. I'm terrified, Caleb admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. That's the only way anything worth doing gets done. Richard leaned back in his chair. Your job will be here when you're ready. No pressure, no timeline. You focus on getting better. Thank you. That means more than you know. And Caleb, for what it's worth, you're one of the best project managers I've ever worked with. We need you back, so don't die on the operating table, okay? It was such a Richard thing to say, awkward and genuine in equal measure. Caleb laughed despite himself. I'll do my best. Ivy threw him a small party 2 nights before surgery. Nothing fancy, just their coworkers, Mrs. Chen, a few of Mara's friends, and their parents. People who had shown up over the last 7 months, who had brought food and offered help, and reminded Caleb that community existed if you let it. Speech! Someone called out. Caleb hadn't prepared anything. He stood in his crowded living room with Mara on his hip and Ivy beside him, looking at all these people who had become his support system without him quite realizing it. I don't really know what to say except thank you. 7 months ago, I got the worst news of my life and thought I'd have to face it alone. But I didn't. You all showed up. You helped with Mara, brought food, covered for me at work, sat with me through treatment. You made this bearable. His voice caught. And Ivy, he looked at her. You saved me. In every way a person can be saved. So thank you. All of you. Ivy was crying. So was Mrs. Chen. Someone started clapping, and then everyone joined in, and Caleb stood there feeling overwhelmed and grateful and terrified all at once. Later, after everyone had left and Mara was asleep, Ivy found him standing in Mara's doorway watching her sleep. You okay? She asked quietly. Just memorizing this, in case... Don't. She put her arms around him from behind. You're going to wake up from surgery and come home, and she's going to drive you crazy asking when you can play dinosaurs again. That's what's going to happen. You can't know that. Watch me. She turned him to face her. I love you. Mara loves you. You're going to fight your ass off to come back to us, and you're going to make it. What if I don't? Then I'll love you anyway, and I'll take care of Mara and tell her every day how much her father loved her. Ivy's voice was fierce. But you're not going to die. You're stubborn and determined, and you have too much to live for. Caleb kissed her, trying to pour everything he couldn't say into the gesture. When they finally pulled apart, Ivy was smiling through tears. Come to bed, she said. You need to rest. They lay tangled together in the dark, neither of them sleeping, both of them holding on. The morning of surgery arrived gray and cold. Caleb woke at 5. His stomach churning with nerves and the effects of not eating since midnight. Ivy was already up, moving quietly around the bedroom. Hey, she said when she noticed he was awake. How are you feeling? Like I'm about to have someone cut me open and rearrange my internal organs. So, normal pre-surgery jitters? Despite everything, he smiled. Something like that. They woke Mara at 6. She was groggy and confused until she remembered what day it was. Then she clung to Caleb like a barnacle. "You have to come back," she said into his shoulder. "Promise." "I promise to try my hardest." "No, promise you'll come back." Caleb looked helplessly at Ivy over Mara's head. How could he make a promise he might not be able to keep? "I promise," he said finally, hoping desperately that he could make it true. Mrs. Chen arrived at 6:30 to take Mara to school and pick her up after. She hugged Caleb hard enough to crack ribs. "You're a fighter," she said. "Don't you forget that." "Yes, ma'am." The drive to the hospital was quiet. Ivy held his hand the entire way, her grip tight enough to hurt. They checked in at 7, and a nurse led them back to pre-op. The next hour was a blur of consent forms, IV placement, visits from the anesthesiologist and surgical team. Dr. Chen came by, confident and focused. "Ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be." "Good. I'll see you in the OR. We're going to take good care of you." Then it was just him and Ivy, waiting for them to wheel him away. "I'm scared," Caleb admitted. "Me too." She leaned down, forehead against his. "But I'll be right here when you wake up. First thing you see, I promise." "What if I don't?" "You will." She kissed him. "I love you. Come back to me." "I love you too." The surgical team arrived to take him back. Ivy held his hand until the last possible second, her face the last thing he saw before they pushed through the OR doors. Then there was just the bright lights, the bustle of the surgical team. Dr. Chen's calm voice telling him to count backward from 10. He made it to 7 before the world went black. Ivy sat in the surgical waiting room for 11 hours. She'd brought her laptop thinking she might work, but couldn't focus on anything except the clock. Mrs. Chen came by after dropping Mara at school, bringing coffee and muffins Ivy couldn't eat. Richard stopped by during lunch, awkward but kind. Other coworkers texted throughout the day. But mostly it was just Ivy and her spiraling thoughts and the terrible, endless waiting. At hour 8, a nurse came out to update her. "Surgery is going well. They're about 2/3 done. Dr. Chen will come talk to you when it's over." At hour 11, Dr. Chen finally appeared, still in her surgical scrubs. Ivy stood so fast she nearly knocked over her coffee. "He made it through," Chen said, and Ivy's knees nearly gave out. "The surgery went well. We removed the tumor and got clean margins. No visible cancer cells at the edges. He's in recovery now. Once he's stable, we'll move him to the ICU." "He's okay?" Ivy managed. "He's alive. The next 72 hours are critical. He needs to wake up from anesthesia, start healing, avoid infection, but the surgery itself was successful." Chen smiled slightly. "He's a fighter, your guy. When can I see him?" "Give them another hour or so to get him settled in ICU. Then you can go in." "But Ivy," Chen's expression turned serious. "He's going to look rough. Lots of tubes and machines. Try not to panic." Ivy nodded, not trusting her voice. Chen left, and Ivy stood alone in the waiting room and let herself cry for the first time all day. Relief and residual fear and overwhelming gratitude all pouring out at once. He'd made it through surgery. The first hurdle was cleared. Now they just had to hope he could survive recovery. The ICU was exactly as terrifying as Chen had warned. Caleb lay unconscious, a ventilator breathing for him, tubes and wires connecting him to a dozen different machines. His skin was gray, his face slack. He looked dead. Ivy forced herself to move closer, to take his hand carefully around the IV line. "Hey," she said quietly. "You made it. You're on the other side." Her voice cracked. "Dr. Chen says you did great. Clean margins. The cancer's gone." She squeezed his fingers. "Now you just need to wake up and start healing. We need you, Caleb. Mara and I need you. So you fight, okay? Like you've been fighting all along." There was no response, just the steady beep of the heart monitor and the mechanical whoosh of the ventilator. Ivy pulled up a chair and settled in to wait. The first 3 days were hell. Caleb remained unconscious for 36 hours, which the doctors said was normal, but felt eternal. When he finally woke up, he was confused and in pain and couldn't remember where he was. The ventilator came out, but he struggled to breathe on his own. His blood pressure kept dropping. He spiked a fever on day 2 that sent everyone into controlled panic until the antibiotics kicked in. Ivy barely left his side. The nurses brought her blankets and let her sleep in the chair beside his bed. She held his hand through the worst of the pain, talked to him when he was lucid enough to listen, and tried to stay positive when everything felt like it was falling apart. On the 4th day, he was finally stable enough to move to a regular room, and on the 5th day, he was awake enough to really talk. "Hey," Ivy said when his eyes focused on her. "Welcome back." "Did I die?" His voice was rough from the ventilator. "No, you made it through. Surgery was successful." "The cancer?" "Gone. Clean margins. Dr. Chen got all of it." Caleb closed his eyes, and tears leaked from the corners. "I made it. You made it." Ivy leaned forward, careful of all the tubes. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck, and then the truck backed over me, and then maybe drove over me a few more times for good measure." Accurate description of abdominal surgery. "Where's Mara?" "Mrs. Chen has her. I didn't want her to see you in the ICU. Too many machines, too scary. But I can bring her by now that you're in a regular room, if you want." "I want." He squeezed her hand weakly. "I missed her. How long has it been?" 5 days. 5 days? He looked genuinely shocked. "It feels like hours." "Drugs will do that. The good news is you're healing. The bad news is you have at least another week in the hospital, maybe 2. Caleb groaned. "I hate hospitals." "I know, but you're alive to hate them, so I'll take it." They brought Mara in that evening. She was nervous at first, frightened by the hospital room and all the equipment. But when Caleb opened his arms, she carefully climbed onto the bed and curled against his side. "You came back," she whispered. "I promised, didn't I?" "You look funny." "I feel funny, but I'm getting better." She stayed for an hour, telling him about school and her dinosaur collection and how Mrs. Chen had taught her to make dumplings. Normal kid stuff. The most beautiful sound Caleb had ever heard. After she left, he looked at Ivy with exhausted eyes. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For keeping that promise. Being the first thing I saw when I woke up. For staying. For everything." "Where else would I be?" She kissed his forehead. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we start physical therapy, and you're going to hate it. Can't wait." Recovery was brutal. The physical therapy pushed him to his limits. The pain management was a constant balancing act. His digestive system had to relearn how to function with rearranged parts. There were setbacks, a minor infection, a drain that got clogged, days where he couldn't keep anything down, but there were victories too. The first time he walked to the bathroom without help. The first meal that didn't make him immediately nauseous. The day they removed the last of the drains and tubes. Each small step forward felt monumental. 2 weeks after surgery, Dr. Chen came by with his pathology report. "Final results are in," she said, pulling up a chair. "The margins were clear. No cancer cells in any of the tissue we removed, and we tested 32 lymph nodes, all negative." Caleb stared at her. "What does that mean?" "It means, as far as we can tell, we got it all. You're cancer-free." The words didn't feel real. Cancer-free. After 7 months of fighting, of poison and pain and fear, could it really be over? "What about it coming back?" Ivy asked. "That's always a possibility. We'll need to monitor you closely. Scans every 3 months for the first year, then every 6 months. But right now, today, there's no evidence of disease." Chen smiled. "Caleb, you beat it. Celebrate that." After she left, Caleb and Ivy sat in stunned silence. "We did it," Ivy finally said. "I can't believe it." "Believe it. You're cancer-free. You're going to live." She started crying. "You're going to live." Caleb pulled her onto the hospital bed, holding her as carefully as his healing incisions would allow. "We're going to live. Together." "Together," she agreed. He came home 3 days later, still weak and sore but healing. Mara had made a welcome home banner that covered half the living room. Mrs. Chen had stocked the fridge. The apartment had never looked better. That first night home, Caleb sat on his couch with Mara tucked under one arm and Ivy under the other, and felt peace settle in his chest for the first time in months. "Can we get the dog now?" Mara asked. "Not yet. Give Daddy a few more months to heal first." "But you promised, after surgery." "I said after surgery, if everything went well. Everything did go well, so yes, we'll get a dog. Just not today." Mara seemed satisfied with this. She went back to her coloring while Caleb and Ivy exchanged glances. "You really want a dog?" Caleb asked quietly. "I really want a future where we're stable enough to handle a dog, where you're healthy and we're a family and life is boring and normal." Boring and normal sounds perfect. Recovery took months. Caleb had to relearn how to eat, starting with small portions and specific foods his reconstructed digestive system could handle. He lost weight he couldn't afford to lose, then slowly started putting it back on. Physical therapy was grueling. Some days he felt strong. Other days he could barely get out of bed. But he was alive. His 3-month scans came back clear. Then his 6-month scans. Each time the relief was overwhelming, but so was the fear that the next scan would show something. "You can't live your life waiting for the other shoe to drop," Ivy said after the 6-month results. "At some point you have to accept that you made it." "How do I do that?" "You start making plans beyond the next scan. You start believing in the future." She took his hand. "You start living instead of just surviving." So Caleb tried. He went back to work part-time, then full-time. He attended Mara's school events and parent-teacher conferences. He had dinners with friends and lazy Sundays watching movies. He lived. And one evening, about 8 months after surgery, he found himself in the kitchen making dinner with Ivy while Mara did homework at the table, and realized he was happy. Not just grateful to be alive. Not just relieved the cancer was gone. Actually, genuinely happy. "What are you smiling about?" Ivy asked, noticing his expression. "This. Us. Everything." He pulled her close. "I'm happy." "Yeah?" "Yeah." He kissed her. "And I've been thinking. Dangerous. Marry me." Ivy froze. "What?" "Marry me. Make this official. Be my family for real, not just on paper." He pulled back to look at her. "I love you. I want to spend whatever time I have left, whether that's 5 years or 50, with you. So marry me." "That's the worst proposal I've ever heard." "It's the only proposal you've ever heard. Still the worst." But she was smiling, tears streaming down her face. "Yes. Yes? Yes, you idiot. Of course, yes." Mara looked up from her homework. "Are you guys getting married?" "Looks like it," Caleb said. "Finally, I've been waiting forever. Can I be the flower girl?" "You can be whatever you want, bug." They got married 3 months later in a small ceremony at the same park where Caleb used to push Mara on the swings. Nothing fancy, just their closest friends, Mrs. Chen crying in the front row, Mara as flower girl taking her job very seriously. Dr. Morrison came. So did Jessica from the infusion center and Dr. Chen. All the people who had helped save Caleb's life gathered to celebrate the life he'd built. When Ivy walked down the makeshift aisle, Caleb felt his chest tighten with emotion. This woman who had shown up when he was at his lowest, who had refused to let him face cancer alone, who had loved him through the worst of it, was about to become his wife. The ceremony was short, the vows were simple, and when the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Caleb did, pouring everything he felt into the gesture. They had a future now. A real one, not just a possibility. 1 year after surgery, Caleb's scans remained clear. The oncologist started using the word remission without qualifiers. The fear didn't disappear completely, it probably never would, but it became manageable. Background noise instead of a constant scream. They did get the dog, a scrappy terrier mix from the shelter that Mara named Professor Scales because he's smart like a professor and has bumpy skin like dinosaur scales. The logic was questionable, but the name stuck. Caleb went back to being a project manager, though he found he cared less about deadlines and more about the people he worked with. Ivy got promoted. Mara started first grade and lost her 2 front teeth in the same week. Life happened. Normal, boring, beautiful life. On their first anniversary, Ivy and Caleb stood in their kitchen, the same kitchen where they danced when he was sick, where they'd made awkward dinners and difficult decisions, and Caleb pulled her close. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For staying when it was hard. For loving me even when I couldn't love myself." He kissed her forehead. "For giving me a reason to fight." "You gave yourself the reason. I just reminded you it was there." She looked up at him. "You saved yourself, Caleb. You fought. You survived. That's all you." "We did it together." "Yeah, we did." She smiled. "So what do you want to do with the rest of your life now that you have one?" Caleb looked around their small apartment, at Mara's artwork covering the fridge, at Professor Scales asleep in his bed, at the life they'd built from fear and hope and stubborn determination. "This," he said, "just this. You, me, Mara. Maybe another kid if you want. Maybe not. But this. Every boring, normal, perfect day of it. Sounds good to me." They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, and Caleb felt gratitude so deep it was almost painful. He'd been given a second chance, not just at life, but at living, at love, at family, at all the small moments that made up a life worth fighting for. The cancer might come back someday. The statistics said it was possible, even likely. But right now, in this moment, he was healthy, he was loved, he was home, and that was enough. That was everything. Because in the end, Caleb had learned that survival wasn't just about beating the disease. It was about the people who held your hand through the darkness. The woman who showed up when you were too sick to ask for help. The daughter who reminded you every day why tomorrow mattered. The community that carried you when you couldn't walk alone. It was about learning that asking for help wasn't weakness. It was the bravest thing you could do. That letting people in didn't make you vulnerable. It made you human. That love wasn't a luxury to pursue when life was stable. It was the foundation that kept you standing when everything else fell apart. Caleb Hayes had faced death at 32 and come out the other side. Not unchanged. You didn't go through something like that and stay the same. But better, maybe. More whole. More aware of what mattered. And what mattered was right here. In this kitchen. In this life. In this moment. He was going to live. Not just exist. Not just survive. He was going to live fully, gratefully, surrounded by love. And that made every painful step of the journey worth it.